Okay, and we're on the air. So I'm very lucky today. I'm joined by three fantastic guests. Dorico Baker, Casey Explosion, and Chrisiousity are here to discuss the US election with me. I feel a bit like Nick Fury. I've got the Avengers assembled. I'm ready to have a fantastic discussion with these three. How are you all feeling today? How are we all?
Well, first off, I'm Nick Fury. You're the agent the agent chick that he had that apparently died, like killed her off. Yeah, that was stupid. I loved her. I'm just fucking with you. I'm doing good. You actually called me at a great time because I actually feel good today. I've been a little under the weather lately, so I'm feeling good.
Oh no. Well, I'm glad you're on the up. Glad you're on the mend. How are the two of you doing? How are you? How are we doing?
I'm not too bad.
And yeah, I'm doing good. And thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. Honestly, I'm flattered that you came on. So we sadly have to discuss something not quite as pleasant as ourselves. The US election is on the horizon. It's only a month and a bit away, and I imagine we all have quite strong thoughts about it. It's quite a big topic. I certainly feel compared to some previous elections, like this one's quite a momentous one, almost like one of the historical events that you're going to read about in the future. I don't know how the rest of us are feeling about it, but certainly to me, it's like a big thing looming on the horizon.
Every 4 years, combating the Republican Party is a momentous occasion because it's literally the deciding factor between things kind of going well enough and everything going to shit every 4 years. You know what I mean? It's a hell of a crossroads to be put on every 4 years. It is honestly exhausting.
Yeah, I gotta agree with that. It is exhausting to every 4 years be told that you've got to go out and get out the vote. We're all going to hell, and it's like there really has to be a better way, don't you think? But that's where we're at, and doing what you can to stop at least the far right from getting its pokey little talons into our upper echelons of government.
And they only get worse every election. Like they only get worse by comical degrees.
It feels like they've really almost they say it themselves, like Project 2025. They see this as their real crowning moment, right? Like if they win this election, then it's like, right, we've got carte blanche now to wipe America. Yeah. Bin off all the existing protections, all the rights and regulations, and enact the dream vision of the Republican Party or of Turning Point USA or any of their little factions inside the party.
For me, if I had to say, like, what's my motivating factor more than anything, like with regards to if anyone asks me why I'm voting for Kamala Harris, for example, it's because Trump and his people have made it abundantly clear that what they're going to do is obviously gut the whole government and replace them with Trump loyalists. But what scares me more than that is them gutting the military and replacing them with Trump loyalists. Because I don't know if you know this, one of the main reasons, like Trump did. A lot of people seem to. I've had arguments with people out there, who just didn't know. Like Trump ordered the protesters in 2020 and whatnot the George Floyd. When did that? It's been so long, I can't fucking remember. Point is, it was the George Floyd protests and whatnot. He straight up ordered them to be shot, unequivocally ordered. He was like, I want the military in there shooting them, and the military generals told him quite literally to fuck no, we're not doing this. And I just imagine, like, what happens if those generals are gone? If anybody who would oppose him are gone and replaced with people with yes men who will absolutely enthusiastically carry out whatever fascist bullshit he wants to do. To see that in the government in general, but especially the military, genuinely terrifies me. And that is the thing I don't want to see happen more than anything.
Yeah, no, it's such a like nightmarish prospect, isn't it? That one of the world's most powerful militaries and Donald Trump whispering his nonsense into all his generals' ears. And beyond that, I think, like, I always see it as the Republican Party is such a menace, such a hydra of different factions and different, insidious beliefs. You've got J.D. Vance, who quite openly has laid out his vision for America. It's quite parallel to the project that his conservative lawmakers have written out. You've got various religious groups coming to the front of the party, even more so than we have in the past, and essentially setting out their idea for America, basically copying the textbook of southern states that essentially have started the process of passing the conservative vision for America in place. You look at states like Florida, where they're gutting regulations to a point of essentially turning it into the libertarian dream, the idea that you can get away with any idea that you'd like, implement any policy you like that's going to favor big business and any corporation. And I see all that on the agenda for the Republican Party, and I almost feel like we're sort of sleepwalking into it a little bit. They're right there at the door, and even though the Democrats have started saying about Project 2025, they have started to raise the awareness of this. I almost feel like it's lost on a lot of people. It's not, the stakes aren't really understood almost, or like recognized. Like I'll give you an example. The other day at university, we were talking about this in class. And we were talking about how every 4 years we have to go through this, and it's always quite a big deal. But seemingly, that as people were saying, 4 more years and we'll have another one, and you imagine that might not be the case if the Republican Party win. There's a real threat that actually over the next 4 years of a potential Republican presidency, they decide, well, do we need to have another election? Do we need to go through this again? Do we need to actually consider the opposition? And that is, as you said, Darika, it is quite terrifying. It's quite frightening that this could be happening in our lifetime in a country that is supposedly leader of the free world.
Well, I have
Go ahead.
I'm not sure how much the right is worse, or whether we're seeing a different side of them in terms of aesthetics. I think they've always had these kinds of plans. I don't think they always wanted to put out there that they had these kind of plans. I don't think that they were as mask off as they have been, but it's really hard to say where some of these ideas, like some of the ideas that you see now, if you were listening to Rush Limbaugh in the 80s or 90s, if you were reading the John Birch Society, back in the day, there's nothing necessarily all that new here. It's just they're much more, I guess, when you have someone like Trump, for better or worse, he's not going to couch his language for anyone, mostly because he can't, he's not the kind of person that can be bothered to do that. And it has been upsetting and disappointing to see that there are a significant number of people who can hear the things he says and say, this is the guy. This is my guy. I want in on this,
It's that element of American society, I suppose, which is just openly supportive of fascism, isn't it? It's that faction which ultimately don't mind authoritarianism if it's their person on top, if it's their movement they see as sort of rising to the top of society. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that America has always had a problem with the far right and right-wing politics, and really, you go back far enough and you've got openly state-sanctioned racism and racial segregation. So there's definitely 100% agree that there's always a sort of narrative of that fascist tendency in the country. I think the Republican Party, whilst it's always had that there, certainly has tried to maybe not move away from it like overtly, but certainly 10 years ago, Republicans weren't acting as overtly fascist as they are doing now. And is it a case that they always had those views but didn't necessarily want to say them out loud? Is it the case that the sort of softer right-wing elements of the party were in charge more then? I think you have to look at the fact that McCain and Romney who obviously aren't good politicians by any means, lost elections to Obama quite convincingly. And I think there's an element of actually they realized that to actually get control again, they had to embrace that fascist element. They had to look at themselves and think, okay, well, why are we actually holding back the things that we want to do when Trump now has come to the party and, or rather has ran for president, got the backing and energy of a lot of people, and we're going to ride that and carry that forward with us. And now that they're on that train and they're sort of fixed almost to Trump and fixed to the open fascism, a lot of them have said, yeah, this is who we are now. This is what we want now. And have embraced all the nonsense and culture war and all the open Nazism that essentially has come to define the party in modern times.
Yeah, so the conclusion I've come to in that regard, because it's like Chrissy said, the horrible policies and beliefs have always been there, but for the longest time, the craziest, most absurd and awful people and policies kind of stayed content with where they were. I don't know if I'd say content, but they were just there. The normie Republicans, so to speak, are the ones who ran the party until Trump happened. And then after that, it has just been, and I mean from the top down at the local level on up, the normie Republicans have been purged. By the louder, more insane, crazy, and not just in the Republican Party, the Libertarian Party as well. The normie for the libertarians, the normie libertarians, the normie Republicans, our policies suck, but we're at least understand some degree of, norms and shit. No, they have all been purged. I've read article after article of lifelong Republicans horrified by what's happened at their local Republican precincts, offices, whatever you want to call them. Talking about like these crazy people just rolled in and just steamrolled them. They just end up in these high level positions at the local level and purged anyone else who didn't fall in line. You know what I mean? It's so the Republican Party, what a lot of the crazies and frauds and con men and such all realize that the Republican Party would reward them, will reward them, so long as they are sufficiently loyal to Trump. And so Trump really was the catalyst to the bridge that really opened the door for the worst, and I mean the worst fucking people alive to capitalize, to take over the Republican Party. Because this isn't to say that there were good, decent Republicans, because I mean their policies still sucked. But I personally still rather a party of, Adam Kinzinger, Liz Cheney, and fucking Mitt Romney. Again, even though policy-wise, terrible, but they're at least honest, decent people to some extent, versus just outright frauds, fascists, liars, and such, who are out here lying, or like J.D. Vance, who are just blatantly lying about Haitian immigrants and shit, just legal immigrants, but calling them all illegal anyway, and saying we need to deport them all. Again, legal immigrants, but we're going to deport them all anyway. You know what I mean? That type of shit did not. This is, at least to me, maybe because I'm young, this feels like a new brand of awful that just did not exist to this extent. But correct me if I'm wrong, Chrissy, Casey. If you, I reckon y'all older than me. It's in the sorry. I don't mean to insult y'all in that way. I'm just saying.
No, I am old.
I'm ancient.
Yeah, I'm just saying. If can y'all tell me, have y'all seen anything like this? Because this feels in the last 8 to 10 years that I've been paying attention to politics. This feels new, like new levels of awful, and there's just no bottom. Like they just keep getting worse.
Do you want to go ahead, Chrissy?
Yeah, sure. Is it? I think that there is a sense here that, like, for instance, Nixon was god awful,
Right?
but when they found out that he was very legitimately breaking laws left and right. He was driven out, and people on his team weren't denying reality. They weren't, or not at the same level as they are now. It was a consideration that, yes, we still have something here that we need to have the law and order, something we want to present ourselves, at least to the American people, as these sorts of, they wanted to present themselves as your dads or your granddads, with a suit and a tie and very very proper, and we're the ones you should trust. We're not like these hippie motherfuckers. We're not, and I apologize if I shouldn't be swearing. We
Swear
aren't.
away. There's no sense
We
for my
aren't
child. Keep
these.
going.
We aren't these, like, sorry to say it, but these gay people. That was often thrown out. So you had this whole era of a politics of respectability, put it that way, that seems that they've just abandoned now. I mean, that Trump can come out there, be found guilty left and right of different crimes and misdemeanors, and spend half of his time out there talking about his crypto scams or his, let me sell you this new junk that I have that has the Trump name on it, and it's the best stuff ever, and blah, blah, blah. Like, that is not the kind of personality that we have ever seen. And I think that has given a certain license to everyone else downstream of him, including people who cannot carry this off the way that he can. We've seen some of the politicians who have attempted to come up and sort of take on that mantle now that he's getting older, and they cannot do it, because it takes a special kind of something, maybe a certain kind of, like, I don't find him charismatic, but I'm apparently not the kind of person who would, but there is a certain kind of person who finds him a very attractive and charismatic figure. And to that person, they are ride or die. And that, I think, is different. This cult of personality is different. And what has happened because of this cult of personality, I think, is different. I think Trump has, he came out because these elements were always a part of the Republican Party, always a part of the conservative movement in America. So he didn't come out of nowhere. But once he sort of got the microphone and has refused to give it up, and has put forward this attitude of just blatancy, just, I am blatantly going to lie, I'm going to cheat, I'm going to rape, I'm going to, literally do these kinds of things, and you guys are going to eat it up. And if anybody tells you that this is bad, you're going to say, no, it's the mainstream media lying. And there's no brakes on it. There's nothing to stop, because it's all the ride or die people, and anybody else is going to be, as Rico said, purged.
Scary
Casey,
stuff.
I don't know if you had anything to add to that, or
So I'm gonna go back to what you were saying about Nixon, and I think a lot of what we are seeing with Trumpism is because of seeds planted back then. Like, there's that whole thing about how Fox News under Roger Ailes was started. The entire intent of Fox News was so that a Nixon situation couldn't happen again. So it's sort of like, well, instead of a case where Nixon was obviously incredibly corrupt and committing crimes, and all of the newspapers reporting that the truth, you'd have like there is a a Republican news outlet to run counter propaganda. So I think a lot of what we're seeing with the Republican Party today is stuff that the seeds were planted long ago, and I think it's more open and in your face these days. But I think the intent was always there. Like Project 2025, we hear a lot about this, but that's coming from the Heritage Foundation. That's coming from you know Koch brothers funded think tanks. They've been around for decades. There's your real kind of source for all this, and it hasn't. It's not new. It's just
Yeah,
mask off.
Right
yeah,
on.
exactly right. Like, so go ahead, Rico.
I was gonna say, so basically, they figured out that we need to wall our people off from effectively reality, so that our the next time we have another corrupt as fuck politician in there, instead of saying no, you have to go, instead we circle the wagons and protect them. Essentially, that they realized a long time ago that
Yeah, exactly that.
we can't make this, like, fuck respectability, fuck all that. We need to have our people
Oh,
convinced.
nice cat.
Oh yeah,
Sorry.
that's my.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. It's my baby girl Polly. She just likes to cuddle with me while I'm streaming or on just sitting at my
Polly.
desk.
That's okay.
Pretty kitty.
Adorable.
But yeah, no, it's, they realized a long time ago that, like, yeah, we need to wall our people off, and that, I mean, I remember reading about that with Fox News as well from Roger Ailes. Like, that was the whole point. That was the whole idea. Keep them scared, keep them addicted to us, and unfortunately it worked. And that's why I always tell people, I'm like, a lot of people on the left, right, or left, liberal, whatever, that for the longest time the right, they've been playing the long game, and it worked to an extent, however you want to define worked, with regards to what they set out to do. And if their goal was to wall off their people from reality, from any counter information, and deem anything and everything counter to their truths as propaganda and lies, then it worked. It worked like a fucking charm. They absolutely succeeded. If that was a seed they planted years ago, a plan they laid out years ago, oh, they succeeded, unquestionably.
I think you've got the organization of capitalism. If you look at the neoliberal project, the works of Reagan and Thatcher to transform their respective nations into their sort of more right-wing vision, and the direction of society that's driven us to further and further right since that period of time. Hello, some random geek. I'll highlight that comment quickly. But you've got a direct attempt by the capitalist infrastructure of the planet, the sort of the wealth owners and the landowners and the fossil fuel companies and all the people with the most wealth, to try and funnel more and more resources up towards them. And if we understand that fascism and capitalism are essentially of the same sort of seed, you've got the same ideas about societal hierarchy and structure and power. If you accept that premise, then as capitalism ages and starts to crumble and starts to realize that growth is not endless, there has to be some balancing act, and the recession that follows is going to come at some point, then the capitalist class, and it does sound a bit Marxist, but I'm going to roll with it, the capitalist class decide that actually it's time to start getting tougher. It's time to start ramping up the rhetoric and time to start taking the ideas that, as you say, were there in the 70s and were there for decades prior to that, and put them back into public conscious. And so following the boom of the 90s that was seen in the UK and cool Britannia and the nicer years that existed for the wealthiest. You then see the crash, and you see the likes of Trump in the US, but also Nigel Farage in the UK. Also the heavy push for anti-immigrant rhetoric and woke is the term thrown around now. I personally find it particularly insipid and ridiculous. Like, it's clear that essentially it's just the latest term for anti-progress, anti-civil liberties, anti any social progress that's happened since essentially slavery, basically, is what they're really saying. I mean, you look
when
at,
I was a kid, they call it they just said political correctness. It's political correctness gone mad.
exactly
It's
right.
it's the same thing. It's just changing the definition every time people start
exactly.
to get okay. It's just more racism.
Exactly. Any bigotry.
The conclusion I've come to in that regard is that, like, with regard, it could go one of two ways. Unfortunately, historically, the two ways people typically go on is lean more towards the far right solutions. At least as far as I know, everybody just, even when the option when say the capitalism stuff isn't working, or it is working as intended, and lots of people are poor, and there's a recession, and blah 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 blah. You got two choices. You know what I mean? You can either turn it to it's us versus them, or we can do better than this. Like, we can all prosper, we can all better. We just gotta, tax the right people, implement the right social changes, this, that, and the third. But unfortunately, at least as far as I could tell, it seems the go-to is to just, blame immigrants, LGBT people, non-white people, and then eventually poor people. Oh, and don't forget the Jews. Well, we always got to blame the Jews. They're the number one. I don't know why we do that every single time, but that seems to be the go-to.
Well, the common theme there is the people who, at the structure, the heart of capitalism, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, were all those groups that we've just mentioned. So, white, straight men at the top of society who decided to racialize race. So black people are suddenly a subhuman race, and they have to be put to work. And conveniently, that makes them extremely rich, because if you've got a huge army of slaves working for you, suddenly you now have unpaid labor at the masses. Gender, if you're claiming that women are the weaker sex and are bad and need to be controlled by a man, all of a sudden all the domestic labor is now free, and you don't have to worry about that, and you can offload that to someone who is scientifically made for that. If LGBT people don't exist, then you've got, again, more reinforcement for patriarchal ideas, which reinforces the view of a family that puts a man on top. All of these things are about maintaining power, and so they wed firmly with the capitalist idea of hierarchy and of maintaining your capital over others and being at the top of the pyramid. And that continues through history and through the history of fascism, where when a group decides they need to put themselves at the top, it comes at the expense of everyone else. And going back to Trump, I suppose part of his, you said cult of personality earlier, Chrissy, that is exactly what's happening, because he puts himself on top and tells those who are his followers, we're the in-group, we're the guys who are the real America, and everyone else is an enemy, a traitor. Every week, Trump is rattling off some list of people that he's going to basically fire, imprison, have investigated. If a judge says that he's broken the law, then that judge is secretly an agent of the left, whatever that is. There's always something for him to go after. And it's the same with the Republican Party. They know that if they want to preserve capitalism and certainly their model of capitalism, where they are on top, their companies, their organizations, their power structure, they've got to defend it basically with their lives. And so they know to some degree, if they lose this election, I feel obviously they'll still try and win, they'll still try and be there, but it is a bit of a turning point, because there's only so much room left for them, especially with the demographics in America changing, with more young people drifting left, with more people of multicultural backgrounds, just by virtue of being represented and being present, naturally sort of voting against the Republican Party. They know that their time is coming. I've read a really interesting, and sorry to continue talking, there's a fantastic book about slavery called The Half Has Never Been Told by Edward Baptist. And it's like an oral history almost of slavery and of the Deep South and of the history of Black people in America, basically. And one of the passages talks about the pro-slavery movement and their fears of what would happen to America if slavery was abolished. And it's interesting because their predictions are completely right. Civil rights for Black people, voting for Black people, interracial marriage, breakdown of the white supremacist norms that they'd established, and of a more left-wing, more equal society. And from their perspective, obviously they see it all as bad things, but the predictions are accurate because as you break down the hierarchy and the unjust power structure that white supremacist capitalism maintains, you build a more equitable society, one that's better for everyone, one that's more productive and fairer, and ultimately one that is a healthier, happier place to live. And there is a fear for the Republican Party that if they can keep on losing these elections and they keep on falling out of power, that their vision for the society where they're on top is just going to be abandoned. There's not going to be, a real consensus or want for that to actually happen because people will think, well, why would we bother with this? And so they push so hard for Trump, and they try and pull every stop to try and make themselves win this election that's coming up because they know that they're running out of time. And I feel as though, whilst there is a big risk, of course, that if they win, a lot of bad things on the horizon. There is also some hope for me because if they lose, and of course it relies on Democrats being actually competent, which we'll get onto in a moment. But if they lose, there's a chance to hammer them into the ground for good and to really actually put the nail into the coffin and kill off the movement dead.
Yeah, I would say obviously they're not just going to go away. They're not. Whether they lose this or not, even if they lose by large margins, and even if Trump is done after this, like he just gives up, I'm done, I'm too old, I'm not running anymore. They're not just going to give up, obviously, but the Trumpism is a dead end, I say. Yeah, Chrissy, Casey, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, it's a dead end because, as we've noticed, no one has the juice of Trump. Or that Trump had. He's definitely lost his sauce after years of
he's way lost us.
Way lost it.
Yeah.
None of the juice he had back in 2016. But
I don't even think he had that much juice to begin with. I think that his win was largely on account of Hillary Clinton
being just that disliked. Yeah. But
not just her being disliked. Her campaign actively promoted Trump as the Republican,
the guy that they would want to go up against,
because they thought he would be the easy win, and
they regretted that.
Yeah, well,
I remember that too. We were hearing about that, how they did prop him up. They wanted him, but and even though they won a popular vote, it doesn't matter. They lost where it counted because that campaign was just a terribly ran campaign.
They also like
go ahead
with the Bernie Sanders campaign had a lot of organic kind of groundswell, a lot of support, and that was just kind of kicked to the curbside by the Democratic Party. So I do think that Trump this time around just really does not have the juice.
He just seems so old and tired now. I was you know what I mean? Is it just me? He seems confused? Yeah. And I love mocking people now at this point where I'm just like, yeah, man, it must suck having an ancient, confused, doddering old man as a candidate. Couldn't be us. Sucks to suck, buddy. That must be rough.
Yeah.
One guy was like, "Oh, you did not too long ago." Well, I don't need more, bitch.
Well, again, you have, and this has been one of the major problems with any fascist authoritarian movement. is that because hierarchy is so solidified, it can't react to, when the Democrats, and I am not like thrilled with Democrats. I don't find them anywhere near left enough for me, but but when we saw that we had an issue with our presidential candidate, there was a conversation. There was a very heated conversation, and there was a result to that, which is just never going to happen when you have an authoritarian regime that's very top down and where the power is just calcified. It's just one of the great weaknesses, I guess.
It is their greatest strength and their greatest weakness. It is that strength that they do consolidate, like they so fully consolidate on one person. That is absolutely useful, but it also, like you said, it works against them too.
Yeah, no, it's certainly a very unhealthy power dynamic to have. But on the topic of the Democrats, I've just seen a comment which is, I think, quite a fitting one, especially as you mentioned, Chrissy, that the Democrats are nowhere near as left as they ought to be and should be. And that weds nicely with what I was saying a moment ago, because I feel as though if the Democrat Party were absolutely 100% ready to take on the far right and the Republican Party, they win this election and they could wipe the floor. They could really put the nail into the coffin. However, issues like this, like Palestine, which are some of the most defining of our time at the moment, I think really are millstones around the party at the moment. Because for as much as I find it almost really saddening that we have to sort of not tiptoe, but people are dying by the thousands, and it's almost like taking a backseat almost to an election. And for whilst obviously it's a really important election, and it's so era defining almost, and yet you've got this awful event happening in the Middle East, and there's no. It's almost like there's not enough space to discuss it all almost. And I think my issue is that part of the Democrats, if they want to be a true force for democracy and true force for justice, and if they want to really put the sword to the Republican Party, as they could do, because there's 100% there's a real discontent with Republicans. Like, I think you've got people like J.D. Vance and even Trump to an extent, who just say things which people do not want. Like, no one wants Social Security binned off, or schools privatized, or tax basically abolished for wealthy, or all the other awful things they plan if they win the election. And yet the Democrats, by almost prolonging their sort of tiptoeing along, trying to weave out a middle ground for how they can go through the election process without annoying Israel too much, and without sort of getting too close to discussing the genocide, or offering sort of little bits here and there. They need to, for me, and unfortunately I feel like we're not going to get this, but given the abhorrentness of what's happening at the moment, to me, what would really captivate and show that actually change is possible for everyone on the planet, not just some, would be a bold statement about that. Because I feel like, as well, given what's happening now with Lebanon as well, there's, to me, an urgency to actually say, okay, we need to actually do something now and stop this before it implodes even further and becomes an even more stark crisis. Yeah. I worry that they're not quite capturing they've done a lot better than they have recently, but that better isn't quite enough for me at the moment. Like, there's that issue for me still.
I was going to say, it doesn't help that the authoritarians in the Middle East, like Netanyahu, for example, of like blatantly is like, yeah, I'm not negotiating anything until after the election. I'm not doing anything for you. I'm not listening to anything. We're not. It's not gonna be peace. No ceasefire. No nothing. I'm not doing shit. Y'all say until after the election. That Trump has coordinated with him already. Like, if there's anything I want Democrats to do, or somebody in the fucking federal government be like, is it just legal for him to do that? For Trump to just contact another world leader and just be like, hey, yeah, undermine the current administration in every way that you can, please, because it'll help me get elected. Can we really just do that?
Staggering, isn't it? Absolutely staggering.
That one, when I read about that, I was like, was that legal?
No, absolutely not. But who's going to stop him?
That's a good point.
That's my thing, really. But I think that's where the Democrats have to be a bit. Yeah, they should see the Republican Party do not care about any due process. Their candidate literally is a criminal of multiple crimes. He will stop at nothing to get back into power. They're striking people off the electoral ballot in multiple states, all the states that they need to win as well. They don't care. They literally sent their supporters to the Capitol to try and get the election overturned last time. And to me, all of that should be like, okay, gloves off. Democrats need to absolutely put all their efforts into stopping Republicans however they can. And part of that, to me, because what really frustrates me is 100% Democrats are better for the Middle East than Republicans. You only have to look at what happened to Afghanistan to see what happens when you put people like Trump in charge of interacting with foreign world leaders. But too many in the Democrats have been too comfortable with the current arrangement and been too almost placid and just sort of sat by and let this unfold, and it's got worse and worse and thousands are dead, and they need to be firmer. And if they can be firmer, like it's been great seeing, for instance, Harris and Waltz essentially come out and say, yeah, Republicans say odd, strange, weird things, and they aren't fit to be saying this stuff and then try and get elected. That attitude should also be had with situations abroad and situations with the Trump administration and the Republicans operating and stuff. And I think part of that, there's a theory, certainly in many left-wing circles, that the Democrats are part of the same cabal as Republicans, part of the same, both parties both the same. They both have the interest of just making money for the American corporate world. And I think it is nuanced, because I think there's definitely that element with the Democrat Party. Any political system under capitalism is going to have that muddied interest. And certainly in America especially, there is that tendency to militant intervention. Israel's an ally of America, so they're always going to be, no matter who's in charge, going to be an element of supporting them with military aid. However, given the critical nature we're in as a planet, climate change, rising fascism, instability in democratic nations, there has to be a point where you say, actually, now's the time to really break the mold. Kamala Harris, she's already done, like, her whole sort of vibe shift has been about trying to change the image and trying to put hope into much of the nation. Now would be a great time to actually say, okay, we're going to go full out on this, and we're going to do something about Netanyahu. We're going that's going to actually mark a change from what we've seen, which has led to devastation in Palestine.
Yeah. And obviously, again, not big Democrat fan, because they are not left enough for me. Of course, anybody who was left enough for me is not going to win. So, I'm well aware. It's been a lot of elections where that has been the case, what I have seen, because I follow a lot of Palestinians on the internet, those who have access on Twitter, or what have you. I have seen that a lot of reports that Palestinians are very concerned about what would happen if Trump rose to power. And I think that that is a very reasonable concern for them to have. Not that it's going to be great necessarily if Harris gets in, but they're having a bad enough time that we don't necessarily want to put the gas on. We don't want to take off all the brakes. And I have often felt personally as an American person that America has this ubiquitous reach, often for the worst, often a very bloody reach into the world, where we shape the world in our image, where we have a military that is all over the planet, that is, has bases in all these different countries, that has the capacity to throw out unknown devastation on people, unimaginable based on, from a historical standpoint, devastation. And that thread is always there to me in my mind. The possibility of just the worst possible outcomes is always there. It's not necessarily likely or something that I think is going to happen, but to me, I always think, I'm sure that there are people in a lot of different countries that would love to have a say in American politics, and they don't have any. And I have very, very, very little. I'm in one of the political reality is that it comes down to a handful of people in a handful of states because of the weirdnesses and intricacies of our election system, especially when it comes to the higher up, the federal government. And so, but whatever say I have, I've always felt a responsibility to put that forward and to try to use that little voice that I have in the best way possible. Speaking not just for myself, but, in trying to think about what people all over the world might be thinking, what my concern about the Palestinians, and I am very concerned about the genocide in the Palestinians, and I talk about it a lot, and I put my voice out there, put, money on the table out there, do what I can, as just a very small and insignificant person. But if I hear that they have a concern about one candidate and they prefer another, then that does actually have a huge impact on the way that I consider using my vote. I'm not endorsing anybody. I'm not telling anybody else what to do, because I know that there are a lot of people who are out there, and I'm very sensitive to this idea that here somebody is going to be saying these horrible things, or who is not going to put themselves out there for Palestine, is not going to meet this tiny, tiny little step of I'm against genocide. Genocide is kind of bad when you think about it. I don't like that. That's not this huge hill that people should be having to reach over, but some people can't do it. And I don't want to be the one to vote for someone who can't do that. It's just where I come down. I don't think we'd be in a better position for helping the people of Palestine or for stopping the madness. I think that from Netanyahu's perspective, the best thing that could happen would be Trump being elected. And I don't
100%.
want to see that happen. So
yeah,
I will do what I can.
He's made it abundantly clear that he wants Trump. He wants him bad because at least because a lot of people typically say, how could it possibly get worse? I'm like, if you can't imagine what worse looks like, I crack open the history books, because people like Netanyahu have done worse and will do worse than whatever it is you can imagine. Whatever he can get away with, he's gonna do. He's right now he's pushing a lot of lines with the international community, but with Trump, there'll be no more lines. There'll be nothing holding him back from completely. I mean, Trump has said it himself. He just basically wants Gaza glassed. You know what I mean? Just wipe them all out. Get it over with. Get the final, final solution, whatever the fuck you want to call it. He wants them gone. You know what I mean? For me, that's if that's what the alternative is a guy who just wants Netanyahu to finish the job as he's so described it. I'm like, it's pretty clear what could be. It could get worse. I don't like that. That's just fucking terrifying. When you got we got two guys who are just batshit fucking insane, telling each other that they're geniuses or some shit, man. I don't like it. I don't know much about the conflict as such. All I know is one bad guy wants the other bad guy so he can be an even badder guy, and that is a terrifying prospect to me.
Yeah, no, it's such a terrifying is a good word for it. I think just that the idea that Trump is Netanyahu's man, but he's sort of courting to be his next partner in the genocide is just horrifying. I think you only have to look at I said it a moment ago, Afghanistan, and how the Trump administration handled that situation and the state the country's in now, where the Taliban are back in charge and essentially have reinstated all the horrific policies
that they did before.
Ideas. And that's the future if you allow the Trump administration to have their have their policy vision for the Middle East. And so I think on any issue, essentially, the Democrat Party is better. Like, I don't think that's a controversial statement in the sense that if you look at any facet of society, Democrat management of it is healthier for people than Republican management of it. I think what becomes the issue is that the Democrats, being the ones who are in power currently, have the chance to do something profound, do something that sets an agenda. I think it's absolutely 100% important to consider, as you said, Chrissy, that people in Palestine are very worried about Trump, 100%. And to me, it's not even a question that the Democrats should be if someone thinks I'm not going to vote Democrat because of Palestine, it's a good reason. That statement alone, that premise is in a just electoral system, absolutely correct. My concern then would be, okay, well then what is in that scenario? Democrats don't win the election, Republicans win. Trump says, right, let's double all the stuff we're doing for Israel right now, and we're going to completely support destroying Palestine, destroying Gaza. That is worse. But then the option that has been sort of the way some people discuss it, where it's well, you better vote Democrat, otherwise Republicans are going to destroy Gaza. It's almost like it's seen as a bargaining chip to some degree. And I think even within some Democrat circles, I feel it's almost, and it's the classic sort of line, isn't it? It's well, who else are you going to vote for? I feel like that mentality has to change. And like you said, Chrissy, the party aren't left wing, but just imagine if they did try. And obviously it's a bit fantastical, right? Because we know that the American society isn't ready for it. But
having talked to a lot of liberals at my local Democratic Party and whatnot, one of them who's tempered me, she's pointed out as there is a great deal of fear of the Republican Party by the Democrats, by just your typical liberals. That's why they even though they share in a lot of very far left-wing ideals, they're so fucking terrified of the Republican Party that they don't try to do anything that could possibly lose them an election because they're terrified of the Republicans. That's what's been explained to me. It's just trust me, it's not that a lot of us don't. I've seen some old, and I've seen and talked to some old far lefty liberal types around me, and they've all said virtually the same thing. It's just they're terrified of the Republican Party. I would ask them, then why not just run on Medicare for all and things like that? If you believe we should have it, because she said because one old lady, I remember her name was Libby, I think, something like that. Yeah, it was Libby. She said because we lose. That's what she firmly believed. She just believed we lose, and we can't afford to lose. She said these people are crazy, and that's what is the. I don't think we're ever going to be the Democratic Party and our government electoral system is ever going to move forward. Ever going to be able to move forward until the Republican Party is completely obliterated, just stomped out from the top down electorally, to the point there's no room for them to muddy shit up anymore, because that's what's motivating a lot of people more than anything is genuine fear of the Republican Party, more than their own personal principles in politics is fear of the Republican Party. That's my observation, at least. Y'all are welcome to correct me.
I would go back for that to that point to the 80s. You don't know how bad we were stomped, even just basic liberals in the 80s under Reagan. I think Dukakis won Massachusetts. Period. That was idiot. That was all.
Gosh.
That was the only state that he took. Before that was Mondale and Ferraro. And that was the first time there had been a woman in the vice presidential seat stomped, destroyed. Just not again and again. They just kicked their ass. Like the Liberal Party got its ass handed to it. And that was there's a lot of complicated talk about boomers and what happened when they went from hippies to yuppies and decided that they were all in on the neoliberal project that we could sit here and talk about. I don't think that's necessarily useful, but the point was, there was a right turn after we had gained some ground. And this happens, these backlashes happen, especially to a lot of people, the very modest, incremental sorts of benefits that were seen by women, by people of color, were just a nightmare. Just like, I can't believe we're living in they had grown up in a world where where they had this great power over a whole group of people, where they could set the rules, and all of a sudden they couldn't do it anymore, up to and including they could, people were getting away with murder, literally. And to have that, for a lot of people, it was a great it was an embarrassment. It was a humiliation. And the idea that, oh, and now women have birth control pills. They can take pills and, they're in control. They can decide whether or not they want to be pregnant. It's not up to the men in power. And we weren't even in the place of really, at that point, we were barely talking about gay people. We were barely talking about the LGBTQ. I remember, because I grew up in the 80s, I remember basically just being told that, because I knew that I was bisexual, that I was queer, but I was told I wasn't, the same way they tell people today. It was a phase. Even, people were just basically told, no, that's not a thing. You're wrong. Like, go back. You're probably mentally ill and just need to go sit down, have a glass of water. I'm sure it'll pass. So we weren't even talking about that. People were dying of AIDS. You were going to these clubs, these gay clubs, and it was like a wake in there. You would get a report on who had HIV, or who was being tested, or there was this. It was almost funereal at some points, as from my memory, anyway. So I think I got lost in my in talking, but I think what I'm saying is that a lot of people that are older are probably remembering those times, remembering that for all that the Clintons fucking suck ass, and I hate I'm not going to say anything good about the Clintons. They gave a win, and they gave it by going in a more neoliberal direction, in turning their back on workers, in turning their back on some of the more traditional leftist ideals.
Yeah, I think it is that it comes down to that pragmatism versus idealism, right? And to me, there's something in it was a very interesting little tangent actually. Just as a history lesson, actually, just like to me how far we've come, because like for me, it was certainly in Britain, being gay was never that's not a way to phrase it. Of course there was stigma, and of course there was absolutely things that were not right with how it was discussed, but
there's also Section 28 under Thatcher.
Yeah, 100%. But perhaps I'm just saying my youth fear perhaps, but there was never quite the same. To me, the idea that the 80s would be normal as like a sort of societal viewpoint for LGBTQ rights seems so alien to me, because it's almost like always been there or thereabouts ish for like from my memory, if that makes sense. And so because of that, I almost feel like that is something to hold on to, the fact that if we fight for it, we can go from the wasteland of previous generations in terms of their limited rights and limited protections for people, to actually it being so alien for some people to even consider that gay marriage wouldn't be legalized, that there wouldn't be protections for LGBTQ people. And that isn't to say that, because you're absolutely right, Casey, that 100% is conservative elements in the UK that seek to destroy LGBTQ people. You only have to look at even what this current Starmer government is trying to commit itself to. 100% that needs to be fought. But to me, if we keep on pushing left and we keep on making noise and making it so that there's no, oh, right, we've won now, let's just sit back and we can just coast now. If we keep on being noisy and being a problem for those of the liberal sort of leaning in power, then there's always going to be the momentum to be able to push left on many issues. And I think
I actually agree with you very well there, and I will add something to that, is that like we can see exactly what you mean in the the fight over marriage equality for LGBT people, LGBTQ plus people, how there was this huge push, and then our side won, and then kind of just sat on it. Like a lot of people who would have been very active kind of just like took the victory and just sat the rest of it out. And it's like, so now we have the situation where you have, this huge pushback against LGBTQ plus rights from a lot of very horrible, the same types of people who were against marriage equality in the first place, pouring money into all these kind of anti-trans stuff now. And it's like, well, now where are we? Trump is Project 2025 and undoing marriage equality. Like, people didn't realize that, no, the right isn't just going to Just say, oh, okay, fair enough, you won fair and square. We'll pack it in. No, they just changed target and pour all that conservative money from the the evangelical right, just pouring all of that into anti-trans stuff, and I think, yeah, you don't just stop fighting.
Don't get complacent, because they capitalized on our complacency. Oh, most definitely they did. There's not one thing that was settled that they have not turned around and come back after years, if not decades later. They'll play the long game. They're waiting. They're not going anywhere. That animosity towards us isn't going anywhere. They hate everything we stand for, everything we believe in, and they will carry that weight for however many years it takes to undo everything we fought for, the others before us fought for. We can't get complacent. We got to play the long game just like them.
100%. And I think that so that's what I was getting us to. We are coming up to about an hour now, so I think that is a nice message to sort of finish up the stream on. Thank you so much, guys, and girls and ladies, for us all being here. It's been a pleasure listening to you all share your thoughts. I'm really glad to be able to have this discussion with you all. Thanks again for coming on, and hopefully we'll do it again soon. Take care, guys. Thank you very much for listening.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.